it's taken me months and months and months, maybe years, to try and explain to some of these coaches how tides in the ocean work, with the moon and the sun moving around the earth, causing high tide, low tide, neap tide, that sort of thing. It's a very theoretical concept, and it's been really difficult to explain that. And it's almost as if there's this inertia in trying to get that complex theoretical idea across. But when it came to Bitcoin, which is also a very complex theoretical idea, it's almost as if there was a lot more incentive to suddenly start learning about this thing. Teaching somebody about Bitcoin, they're being educated about a whole bunch of other stuff. That's not only Bitcoin. It's about finance. It's about money. It's about personal finance. It's about responsibility. It's about all these important things. And all of a sudden, there's this incentive to learn faster than what you learned before.
Welcome to Bitcoin Basics with your hosts Faris and Gordon. Visit bitcoinbasics.help if you need help buying and securing your Bitcoin.
Join our Bitcoin Basics community in our new Telegram group at bitcoinbasics.help/telegram. No ads, no altcoins, shitcoins, no other nonsense, only Bitcoin information, education and discussion at bitcoinbasics.help/telegram.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Basics podcast with your hosts, Faris and Gordon. And we have a really exciting guest with us today. Before we do that, let's go into our proof of recording. The price of Bitcoin is currently trading at $48,875 US. That is 2,046 Satoshis per dollar. And the block height is 713,957. Now, Gordon, we just finished a really enjoyable conversation with Hermann of Bitcoin Ekasi. I really enjoyed this. Gordon, what did you take away from it?
Yeah, you and I have interviewed many guests, Faris, and nothing against them. That sounds really negative. But I think this is the first sort of guest that we've interviewed that is doing sort of a boots on the ground, grassroots project with Bitcoin. And that is super exciting. It's super difficult, as you'll hear some of the challenges that Hermann's facing. But gee, what an amazing work. And you have to start somewhere. So if you're one of those people who, like perhaps me, a little bit of an idealist and Bitcoin's going to save the world, it's good to sort of see how that would be implemented in real life, in a real community. It's difficult. It really is. But Hermann's got a passion, and obviously you'll hear all about that. So I was fascinated by this interview. I could have gone on for another hour asking him about Bitcoin Lightning and on and off ramps and all that kind of stuff in terms of the friction. But here's the interview.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share so we can find others like yourself.
All right. So, guys, it's a real pleasure to have with us all the way from South Africa, Hermann Vivier. Hermann is also Bitcoin Ekasi at Bitcoin Ekasi. So, Hermann, please tell us a little bit about yourself before you tell us what you do. How did you end up where you are today?
Sure. Where do I start? Basically, we live in the Southern Cape of South Africa. I've got a wife and 2 kids, and how I ended up here, that's quite a long story, I suppose. With regards to Bitcoin, I've been involved on and off since about 2013. Fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole following the whole banking crisis in Cyprus, where people had their wealthy people primarily had deposits confiscated overnight to bail out the banking system in Cyprus. There was quite a bit of a banking crisis there, and then I fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and completely fell in love with Bitcoin from the get-go. The whole idea of decentralization of power. It really spoke to me, I've been very interested in Bitcoin. I've done a bit of writing for Bitcoin magazine. I've had a few articles published with them, nothing major, but and listened to a podcast with Michael Peterson, who started the Bitcoin Beach project they started in 2019, I believe. And I've been walking around with that idea in the back of my head since I heard that interview. My wife and I started a non-profit organization in 2010, which is the same year we got married. It's a bit of a crazy story, but we got married and started a business right away, and things were, I think things in South Africa were, always been a tricky situation with inequality being very, very high. And we were young and idealistic, very young and idealistic. And we started this NPO. And with that NPO being pretty well established, when I heard Michael Peterson talk about Bitcoin Beach, a light bulb just went off. And I thought, well, we could do something similar. Yeah. And it kind of brought together two things that I'm very passionate about, which on the one hand was this NPO that we've been running in the townships, and on the other hand, Bitcoin, and bringing those two together. That's basically what Bitcoin Ekasi is.
That's awesome. And don't worry, I'm old and idealistic, so that's okay. Now Faris and I have a million questions for you, but before we get started, because we always forget, Faris, do you want to plug yourself, your website, your Twitter, or whatever you want people to follow you on?
We've got the Twitter handle, which is Bitcoin Ekasi, at Bitcoin Ekasi. The website that we are using is our parent organization. So the NPO that we founded 10 years ago. We'll probably use that as our website. I don't think at the moment we're not going to create a separate website. So that website is thesurferkids.com. The website belongs to the NPO that this whole effort is based around. But Bitcoin Ekasi is really just an offshoot of that NPO. It's very important to just make that very clear. The Bitcoin Ekasi effort is in support of that nonprofit organization. And the goal is sort of twofold. We want to spread the adoption of Bitcoin, similar to what Bitcoin Beach did. But at the same time, we have to support that nonprofit organization because we're using them as a platform to get a foothold into the community. The website is thesurferkids.com, and the Twitter handle is Bitcoin Ekasi. That's pretty much what we got so far.
So what does thesurferkids.com actually do?
So the Surfer Kids is a registered nonprofit organization. It's a donation-based organization. We've got a group of about 40 kids from a township in Mossel Bay, a very, very poor community. And we run a program that operates 5 days a week. We coach 40 kids how to surf, basically. It takes anywhere between 3 and 5 years to teach one of these kids to become a proper surfer, so they can surf pretty much any conditions that you can throw at them. The program runs from Tuesday to Saturday, and we've got 1 senior coach and 3 junior coaches working for the program. I basically manage it in the background as far as possible. I don't want to be the face of the organization. It's the coaches that do most of the hard work in the community. We're based at a beach that's called Dias Beach in Mossel Bay. Mossel Bay is a town of about 100,000 people. It's about 4 hours east of Cape Town. So it's not one of South Africa's big cities. But what makes the program feasible is the fact that you've got a really, really poor community that's walking distance from a good surfing spot. And the fact that it's walking distance means that we can run the program 5 days a week without having to worry about transport. So that brings down overheads quite a lot. So the kids walk up and down on a daily basis. And we recruit them as young as possible, anything between 5 and 9 years old. They join the program, and they learn surfing. It's what it's all about. The ultimate, I guess the reason we're doing it is because we want to teach the kids something about commitment. There's a lot of talk about opportunities and equal opportunity, and obviously we can't provide all life's opportunities for these kids, but what we can do is we can make sure that they're equipped to make the most of whatever opportunities come their way, whenever that happens. And it's just been sort of a belief of mine for a long time that whether you're rich or poor, no one's ever accomplished anything without commitment. You're going to have to be committed to your goals if you want to make anything of your life. And so we try and teach the kids that. And surfing is a pretty good vehicle for that because it's got a really steep learning curve. It's easy to start having fun in the beginning and then the bug sort of bites you. But then to progress, it's not a natural progression. It's not like learning to run or kick a ball that it sort of happens naturally. Surfing happens in this completely foreign environment in the ocean, and you're surrounded by an immense amount of power, and you've got to learn how to handle that. So it's quite a steep learning curve, and after about, I'd say it's normally about 4 to 5 years, these kids learn to surf pretty well, and that's only happened because they were committed. They had to have shown up at least 3-4 times a week over a course of 4 to 5 years. So that's pretty much what the Surfer Kids does.
No, I can testify to that. Gordon and I grew up in Australia, and I would look at surfing and go, that's one of those things where I would just like to wake up and be good at it. I don't know if I've got the patience to learn it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's easier when you're a kid, obviously. It's one of those things that's, I don't know. I guess it's like I never learned to play the violin or anything like that. But if I had to consider doing that now, it's just like, man, that's just going to be too difficult. I'm not even going to try. It's a really, really steep learning curve. And so it works well for that, and the ocean is such a powerful thing. It's got so much natural power in it that you kind of, it teaches a powerful lesson. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I know it does.
So when you guys set up the nonprofit organization, did you look at going through conventional funding through UN agencies or internal South African aid agencies?
Oh, we've played around with quite a few different types of funding models, and we don't get any support from government. I think we're too small for that. It's a very small organization. We've tried to grow the organization bigger, but surfing being what it is, you're very limited in how many kids you can accommodate. I mean, taking 20 kids into the ocean is quite a task. It's not like playing around with a bunch of soccer balls on a field where you can have 3 coaches looking after 100 kids if you had to. The ocean is a dangerous place if you don't know what you're doing. So we've had to keep the organization quite small just because of that. So we've never been really big. So it's been very difficult to attract corporate funding. Government funding in South Africa, sure, that's a tricky one. So we've looked at different ways of funding the organization. At the end of the day, the thing that worked best for us was just community-based donations. We looked at different ways of generating money through all kinds of initiatives, and the more you focus on income generating initiatives, the less attention you can focus on the kids, which is ultimately what you want to pay attention to. So we've always just moved back to funding it through donations, which has been tricky, obviously. I mean, we've never had more than 3 months of operating budget in the bank over the course of the last 10 years. So you can't plan 2 years ahead if you've only got a 3-month budget in the bank. So that makes it really tricky, but it's still going. So yeah.
So how did Bitcoin fix you?
It hasn't yet. Me personally, or the organization.
So why Bitcoin? Sorry, why did Bitcoin Beach resonate with you? What difference has Bitcoin actually made to the Surfer Kids?
Okay, I see what you're asking. Well, I mean, we obviously started the Surfer Kids because we want to help people. You know, that's the world. The world is, I mean, life isn't fair, right? We all know that. You know, but it's a little bit more unfair for some people than it is for others, and that's got a lot to do with the circumstances that you grow up in. So like I said, we were young and idealistic when we started the NPO, and over the years, I've become very realistic about what it takes to change a person's life. You know, there's that old saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, and you teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime, which is true, but it's really difficult to teach somebody how to fish. It takes an immense amount of energy to do that. And so to really change a person's life is incredibly difficult. And I've learned that with the Surfer Kids over the years. You know, if I've changed the lives of 100 kids over the last 10 years, then that's a lot. But it's not a lot if you look at how much energy and time it's taken. And so Bitcoin Beach resonated with me because you know, it's like Jack Mallers said, you know, you're plugging into this open monetary network. And I think a lot of the things, a lot of the negative impacts, or a lot of the negative social structures that I'm fighting against, trying to change these kids' lives, come as a result of the broken monetary system that we find ourselves in. You know, there's a huge emphasis on, for example, short-term gains in the community. The time preference is a massive problem. Saving doesn't happen. You know, it's almost as if Bitcoin can fix a lot more than what I can on my own. So if I can use this NPO as a platform to kind of do what Bitcoin Beach did, then maybe I'd be changing not 100 kids' lives in 10 years, but 1,000 or 10,000, because the effect just sort of goes so much wider. You know, I mean, like Bitcoin Beach, for example, it's one little community, and look what happened. It spread very far and very wide, far quicker than what they would have if they didn't plug themselves into the Bitcoin network. So I don't know if that answers the question, but no.
Yeah. So what I was trying to, because Gordon and I both come from a background of international aid and development, and studied trickle-down economics enough to know it really doesn't work. So for me, like one of the criticisms of direct foreign aid, where, for example, you're using Bitcoin Beach or you're using Bitcoin to fund this program, the criticism would be, oh, well, there's no accountability for Hermann. He can go ahead and do whatever he wants with that money. And this is why we need, and for those of you that can't watch us or listening, I'm air quoting heavily here, we need NGOs and third parties to trickle down that money to people that need it. But and this is where I'm excited about what you are doing, because I see you active on Twitter and we're speaking to you, and I can actually see the work that you're doing. So I know if we're going to encourage people to send you some Satoshis, it's going directly to assisting you. And as you said, you don't need to hire more staff to then apply for funding from third-party sources. So am I right in making that leap, that by receiving Bitcoin donations and by using the Bitcoin network, it's really opening up more opportunities for you and allowing you to do more? Or is it just causing a bit more of an administrative hurdle by adopting Bitcoin instead of using the South African rand?
Okay, so I think I'd answer that in the following way. I mean, look, we have to pay the coaches that work for the Surfer Kids anyway. If we can kill two birds with one stone, then that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So what we've started doing is we're paying our coaches, some of it in South African rand and some of it in Bitcoin. And that's basically what underpins the Bitcoin Ekasi effort. is that those coaches now receive a part of their salary in Bitcoin, and they're spending it at shops in the township. So if people do decide to donate Bitcoin to this effort, it's almost as if you're going to donate South African Rand to the surfer kids, you're accomplishing one thing, and that's you're supporting the NPO to do what it does, which is obviously very important. That's how we've been running for the past, for the most part, for the past 10 years. But if you're going to donate in Bitcoin, you can do two things instead of just one with the same amount of money. So if you're going to donate 1,000 Rand in South African Rand versus 1,000 Rand in Bitcoin, making that donation in Bitcoin, that's killing two birds with one stone, because now you're still supporting the NPO because we're paying our coaches in Bitcoin. And obviously salaries is the biggest expense. I mean, the salaries account for more than half of our funding requirements. So you're still supporting the NPO, but you're also helping to kickstart this Bitcoin economy, which is in its very, very, very early stages. I must just qualify what I'm saying here. It's very, very early stages. We've only got 3 shops that are accepting Bitcoin in the township at the moment, and only 2 of them are really very active. But it's only been 4 months, and so those Bitcoin donations can help to get this Bitcoin economy going in the township, which, if it's successful, could have very positive impacts for people that are not connected to our NPO. I mean, look, our NPO we only work with 40 kids. We can't accommodate more children. We don't have the space. We don't have enough coaches. And there's 4,000 kids in that township that need help. We can't help 4,000 kids. We can only help 40 kids. But if we can kickstart a Bitcoin economy, we can potentially help many more kids by virtue of Bitcoin being what it is. And this is where what Bitcoin Beach that becomes such an important. I always like to say we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Nothing I'm doing here is original. I'm basically just looking at what they did and trying to repeat it. But one of the really important understandings that I got out of Bitcoin Beach was that people tend to think that poor people don't save. And at the end of the day, saving is such an important activity if you're going to try and lift yourself up. You can throw food and clothes and money at people, but if they haven't got the right mentality, you're not going to be able to change the way they operate. But if you can implement that savings mentality, and Bitcoin can do that, Bitcoin can implement that savings mentality, because coming from a privileged perspective, we often don't realize that saving is really investing. Nobody saves cash in a bank. Nobody saves cash in a shoebox under the bed. If you're going to save, you're going to invest your money in some way, whether that's in the stock market or property or whatever. But what do you do if you've only got $100 or $10 a month? There's no investment that you can make there. And this is what Bitcoin Beach illustrated, is that all of a sudden, really poor people who can only save $10 a month is actually saving that $10 a month, whereas before they would have spent it. Do I really need to buy 2 Coca-Colas today? Or can I survive with 1 Coca-Cola and save the money for the other Coca-Cola for next week or next month or next year? And I mean, there's a gentleman in El Zonte in El Salvador, that an older guy, he's on the cover of Bitcoin magazine. They just went back to print, and he's the guy on the cover. He actually had his teeth replaced, which cost him several thousand dollars, but he did that by saving. That was not somebody else coming in and donating the money to him overnight and say, there you go, there's a new set of teeth for you. He did that by slowly but surely saving up and saving in Bitcoin, which encourages saving rather than spending unnecessarily. He did that by saving up. And that's just one of the things that Bitcoin being what it is, it can have that effect. I don't know if it will have that effect where we are operating. That remains to be seen, but it definitely had that effect in El Zonte and El Salvador, and our situation is not that different. So I'm pretty sure it can have a similar effect here, but that remains to be seen. I don't know if that answers the question. Sorry.
Did you know we provide a help desk at bitcoinbasics.help? Do you need help buying Bitcoin on an exchange or transferring your Satoshis to a Bitcoin wallet? Perhaps you need assistance with setting up a desktop, mobile, or hardware wallet. Is your security hygiene up to date? We provide individual, one-on-one support regardless of your understanding of Bitcoin, size of investment, or level of technical ability. Visit bitcoinbasics.help.
I think you're selling yourself short a little bit, Herman. I think you're killing three birds with one stone. You've got the educational aspect, and what you mentioned before, time preference, I think can't be sort of misunderstated. From a technical point of view, and I want to ask you about Lightning in a moment, playing devil's advocate, why? I mean, you've mentioned Bitcoin, and that's great, maybe in a circular economy, so your coaches or people are getting paid in Bitcoin and they go to a local shop and they spend Bitcoin. But wouldn't it just be easier to have PayPal, to have Visa, to have, whatever? Nowadays, all these banks have apps and whatnot. I'm sure the kids, maybe obviously they don't have a bank account, and that's perhaps one reason for Bitcoin. But wouldn't it be easier from an organizational point of view just to have, PayPal or Patreon or some sort of crowdsourced funding?
That's obviously, it's a good question. I think one has to play devil's advocate with these sorts of things. We can't, at least in my line of work, I can't afford to be too optimistic. I've got to be very, very realistic. So it's good to criticize and interrogate ideas like that. And I mean, it might be easier to have a sort of a PayPal type scenario, where you could hook the vendors in the township up with the PayPal. I mean, if they can have a Bitcoin wallet on their phone, they can have the PayPal app. There's no reason why you cannot do that. But again, coming back to what Bitcoin is, it's because of the properties of Bitcoin that it's Bitcoin in particular that enables you to make that mental shift towards a type of money that encourages a savings mentality, a mentality where you think about the future rather than just being focused in the here and the now. And, when your money's finished next week, you just go back for the same handout that you received the week before, rather than to plan ahead and think about, okay, wait, hang on. Let me rather save this little bit of money now, and let's see what I can do with it next week. It's a sort of a mental shift, and I've seen that mental shift happen in one or two of our coaches and in one of the shop vendors that we're working with. Not to the same extent, obviously, that they've seen it in El Zonte, but it's still very early days for us. And I don't know, perhaps we can do the same thing here. And yes, I think education, like you said, maybe we are killing three birds with one stone, because I've most of my time running the NPO, I spend with the coaches, educating them, whether it's with regards to actually running the program and how we're going to do it, and so on and so forth. For the last couple of months, it's been a lot of education around Bitcoin, obviously, how it works with trying to implement this. And I've never experienced such a big amount of learning happening in such a short space of time as I did in these last couple of months when we started talking about Bitcoin. Something just switched on for them. And I mean, look, Bitcoin is money, obviously, and money is one of those very, very basic things that we all need to survive. No matter who you are, where you live on this planet, you need food, air, water, and money. And all of those are almost equally important. And so, educating them about such a basic necessity for survival and showing them this thing that they've been using their entire life. They've never really thought about what is it? What is money? Where does it come from? Or they've used it their entire life, but they've never actually thought about what it was. And so when we start about Bitcoin, it's just, it's maybe a silly example, but it's taken me months and months and months, maybe years, to try and explain to some of these coaches how tides in the ocean work, with the moon and the sun moving around the earth, causing high tide, low tide, neap tide, that sort of thing. It's a very theoretical concept, and it's been really difficult to explain that. And it's almost as if there's this inertia in trying to get that complex theoretical idea across. But when it came to Bitcoin, which is also a very complex theoretical idea, it's almost as if there was a lot more incentive to suddenly start learning about this thing. What incentive is there for them to understand the tides? But money, there's that incentive. So yeah, education, it's a powerful, how can I put it? Teaching somebody about Bitcoin, they're being educated about a whole bunch of other stuff. That's not only Bitcoin. It's about finance. It's about money. It's about personal finance. It's about responsibility. It's about all these important things. And all of a sudden, there's this incentive to learn faster than what you learned before. So yeah, maybe it is three birds with one stone. I don't know. It remains to be seen. We'll see.
I couldn't agree with you more there, Herman. When we teach people about Bitcoin, we have more than half the time we're teaching them about the current economic and financial system for them to appreciate Bitcoin. Having personal context in South Africa, I know that, in the last 10 years, the South African rand has lost more than half its value against the US dollar. So I know people are keen to get out of the rand, and it is difficult to get rands out of the country. How much do you think that has played into people looking to Bitcoin as an alternative? The fact that their local currency just keeps plummeting.
Look, first of all, South Africa has really tight financial regulation. You're very correct when you say that getting money out of rands into other currencies is very difficult for a local person. It's quite strange sometimes for tourists who come here who want to donate dollars to our organization. I have to tell them, sorry, I can't accept that donation, because as a South African citizen, I cannot change dollars. It's like, you give me $100 bill, that's absolutely useless to me. I can't do anything with it. The only way I can change it is to take that $100 bill to another tourist and say, hey, look, if you change this for me at a local currency exchange, you can keep 5% and give me the other 95%, but I personally can't change it. So very, very tight financial regulation, difficult to get out of the South African rand. I don't know how much that's played into people looking at Bitcoin as an alternative just yet. Maybe in wealthier circles, yeah, certainly. But in people who are sort of, at the lower end of the socioeconomic status, I don't think the devaluation of the rand has played into the Bitcoin sphere just yet. Maybe because of the tight financial regulation, people have a natural tendency to be very suspicious of anything that is alternative. South Africa has unfortunately, it's not something to be proud of, but I think it's either the biggest and the second biggest crypto scam, or the second and the third biggest crypto scam, are both South African scams. MTI was a really big one, and then there was AfriCrypt. So unfortunately, there's a huge amount of suspicion around that, which obviously doesn't help, because these scams, very loosely associate themselves with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general. So people have been very, very skeptical. MTI was a massive scam. I personally know many people who lost money as a result of that, and they tied themselves to Bitcoin and so on to steal a lot of money. So I don't know if the devaluation of the rand has played into Bitcoin's favor just yet. Certainly not in the less educated, lower socioeconomic areas. But that's, again, one of the reasons why we want to do what we want to do, is because we would like to illustrate that, look, if you do it right, Bitcoin is not a scam. Yes, there's all these other scams out there, but if you do it right, then Bitcoin is can be very powerful for anybody, no matter where you are on the income ladder, But yeah, the South African rand has struggled a lot. There's been upwards of 25% inflation over the last 5 years, which is quite a lot, and that's the official figures. If you look at food prices, which is obviously, if you're in the lower income bracket, then food prices is the most important thing to think about. And I think there's been more than 30% inflation over the last 2 years, which is massive. I speak under correction. I'm sort of loosely quoting numbers here, but inflation has been a massive problem, and devaluation against the dollar as well. The South African rand has not been a very good store of value, and poor people feel that. Obviously, they instinctively know that it's better to spend their money today than to even try and save this 100 rand for next month or next year. It's intuitively obvious, if I can put it that way. But yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Sorry, I'll go ahead.
That's it. That same sentiment, what you just said, is now expressed in US mainstream media, is how do you fight inflation? Spend your paycheck as soon as you get it. Which is not a solution.
No, it's not a solution. It's almost better to buy canned food with an expiry date. If you don't mind eating that crap, which unfortunately a lot of people we work with they have no choice. But that's a better store of value than our local currency.
So just on that, Herman, and Faris mentions Gresham's law all the time. You spend your bad money first and then keep your better money. And in the Bitcoin world, we love Bitcoin, and in a circular economy, that's fantastic. You get a salary in Bitcoin, pay for send and receive Bitcoin at the local shop. Absolutely fantastic. But what about getting in and out of Bitcoin? In Western countries, unless you want to KYC yourself to Coinbase, that's difficult. But I'm expecting it's even harder in South Africa. So what's the friction like? Some people can't even get a bank account, as we're talking about these marginalized kids. So is there a Paxville, hodl? Like what's the friction like of getting in and out of Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's an excellent point, obviously. Fortunately, we were fortunate when we first launched that one of the first vendors we onboarded had a shop that was somewhat better connected to the legacy financial system. And this vendor had a bank account, so we could link his bank account with a local exchange, Valor, which is one of the biggest exchanges in the country. And he could convert some of his Bitcoin into the local currency using that. And that was really critical, because it proved to him that this is a real currency, this is real money. But yes, most of the shops that we deal with or hope to deal with don't have that. They operate out of makeshift structures like shipping containers and that sort of thing. The entire economy is mostly cash-based in the township. And yeah, even if you look at South Africa as a whole, I think almost 30% of the country is unbanked, which is not a significantly high number if you look at a lot of other African countries. South Africa has a very well-developed financial industry compared to a lot of other African countries. But obviously that number is much higher if you look at the areas that we are looking to focus on. And moving in and out of South African rand is going to be a challenge. Fortunately, yes, there is Paxful. We can use Paxful. Our coaches have started playing around on the platform to see how they can trade in and out of Bitcoin. Converting Bitcoin to local currency is going to be absolutely crucial for this effort. This is not going to be about holding on for the next 10 years. These shop owners are going to have to convert their Bitcoin to South African rands to pay their suppliers to go and buy more supplies. So that's going to be quite a bit of a challenge. But fortunately, there's been so much happening in the Bitcoin space these last couple of years. I don't think doing what we are trying to do now wouldn't have been possible 4 or 5 years ago. But today it might be. Bitrefill is also a very promising avenue. They have greatly expanded their offerings in the local South African market in the last couple of months. So they offer vouchers on their platform for one of the biggest retailers in the country, which is Pick n Pay. It's a chain store. It's a grocery store, but they sell pretty much anything you can imagine: clothes, groceries, food items, and it's sort of like middle of the range. It's not an expensive store. It's not the cheapest either, but you can buy wholesale stuff there. So they offer vouchers. I've used that myself. So Bitrefill is an interesting avenue. Paxful is a very, very interesting avenue that we are looking to explore, because Paxful lets you trade all manner of things for Bitcoin. You can exchange electricity credits for Bitcoin. You can exchange airtime for Bitcoin. You can even sell Bitcoin for cash without a bank account using they call it cash send, which is kind of like if you've got access to an ATM, you don't need access to a bank account. The person selling the Bitcoin needs access to a bank account. Sorry, the person buying the Bitcoin needs access to a bank account, but the person selling doesn't need access, because the person buying the Bitcoin can do a cash send transaction where you literally go and pick up the cash at an ATM. You don't need a bank account. You get a PIN number. You enter the PIN number in the ATM, and the PIN number spits out the cash.
Sorry, do you need a card or anything? You don't need a card. It's just like a PIN number. Wow.
Yeah. So you would if I was buying the Bitcoin from you, then you would send me the Bitcoin. I've got a bank account, and I would initiate this transaction on my bank account, send you a PIN number. You don't have a bank account. You would go to the ATM, enter the PIN number, and the ATM spits out the cash. Sorry, go ahead.
Can this be done? Can this be done rand to rand as well? Is it just Bitcoin and rand transaction?
So no, it's rand to rand. Yeah.
Okay.
So I can. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So sorry, because the unbanked, I know, is a huge part of what maintains people in poverty. So is this something that the government initiated, or was this a private enterprise where they said, okay, you don't need a bank account to access cash?
I think it's a bit of both. But I must say, Bitcoiners love to hate on banks. But I must say the banking sector in South Africa has been relatively good in terms of trying to give people access to very basic services without them having a bank account. So if I've got somebody working for me and I need to pay them in cash, they don't have a bank account, then I can still pay them in cash even if they're not physically with me, because I can send cash to an ATM wherever they're located, and they can just go and pick up the cash at the ATM. So these kind of things make it possible to sell Bitcoin on Paxful without a bank account. And we are going to have to look into ways and means of doing that, because the vendors will have to move in and out of South African rands for obvious reasons.
Wow.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share so we can find others like yourself.
I can see why that probably may have helped with Bitcoin adoption, knowing that there is no third party. that it is peer-to-peer where you're sending them a pin and they don't need a bank account. So this is just me making presumption, but yeah, I assume that would have helped people understand and appreciate Bitcoin going, okay, it's peer-to-peer transaction.
Yes. I think for those owners, for those shop vendors who don't have bank accounts and for whatever reason cannot get a bank account, it is quite attractive knowing that they can deal with something other than physical paper cash. Physical paper cash has its limitations, obviously. It's a massive security risk. What do you do with it? Put it in a box somewhere, but you're always going to be a target. If people know that you've got a shop and you deal only in physical cash, you're always going to be a target. But if you can't get a bank account, what's the alternative? And I think for those vendors, this has been quite an attractive idea. I mean, again, I have to say it's very early days, so it remains to be seen. But the moment the vendors realized that they can convert Bitcoin back into South African Rand, all of a sudden Bitcoin became a very, very, very attractive option for them. We just had to illustrate to them that this is real money. It's not some weird credit system where, you're being pulled into a scam that there's no exit from.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people listening to this can see the benefits and greatness of how Bitcoin could apply. But perhaps could you, for example, you've been doing Lightning payments. Perhaps you could explain, why Lightning and maybe what your experience with Lightning, warts and all has been.
The Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is really quite an interesting development on Bitcoin. I think obviously, we have to use the Lightning Network because we're dealing with very small transactions. So our coaches would go to the shop and they would buy a bread and a cool drink for $2, and paying a $1 fee on top of a transaction like that for a transaction that gets recorded on the blockchain is obviously silly. So without the Lightning Network or without some other scaling method that drastically lowers the fees, an initiative like this just would never get off the ground.
So why not use our favorite coin, XRP Ripple, because I hear it's cheaper and faster than Bitcoin.
I mean, look, this takes us into the philosophy of Bitcoin and what makes it important as a cryptocurrency. And I can only speak for myself. I can't speak on anyone else's behalf. But I sort of experienced the block wars of 2017, sitting on the sidelines, but I obviously had a lot of interest in what was going on, having been into Bitcoin for about 4 years at that time, and I was quite nervous, like everybody else was. And I think my experience coming out of that was that I very much appreciate the drive in the Bitcoin community to prioritize decentralization above all else. Because I think that's what gives Bitcoin its core value proposition, is the more decentralized it becomes, the more unstoppable it becomes. If you can have 150,000 full nodes running, then that's better than 100,000 full nodes, which is better than 50,000 full nodes. And if you can bring that number up to 250,000 full nodes, which all of them are archiving the entire blockchain and auditing the supply on an ongoing basis and recording every single transaction to a hard drive that's located anywhere you can imagine, then that's what enables decentralization. And for that decentralization, you have to make certain trade-offs. And it's just a matter of you can't have decentralization to its full extent if you're going to add complexity to the blockchain. And that's been shown to be the case, with something like Ethereum, which is a lot more complex and a lot more functional. But from personal experience, I know that running a full archival node unless you've got a top of the range gaming laptop, it's just not going to happen.
Not even
even
probably
that.
about $3,000 to run a full archival node.
Yeah. So I've got two old laptops which were donated to our NPO, and I can run Bitcoin full nodes on them. And that's because the developers opted to keep the protocol simplified. But then that limits the speed of transactions. It limits the amount of transactions you can have in a block. And so the Lightning Network is really, or something like the Lightning Network. I mean, there could be other solutions to scaling on top of Bitcoin in the future. It doesn't have to be the Lightning Network, but something like it is going to be needed to make transactions fast and cheap. And I think, the trade-offs that you get with the Lightning Network, again, there's always trade-offs. There's no perfect solution that solves everything perfectly all at the same time. So I think the trade-offs that you get with the Lightning Network, even if it's a custodial type of service, which most of the Lightning wallets at this point are, it's okay if you're dealing with small amounts of Bitcoin. So we've been encouraging our coaches to have a wallet where they would spend their Bitcoin in a semi-custodial type of setup. But then if they want to save a little bit of Bitcoin, they would move that into a wallet which holds their own private keys, and it's recorded in transactions on the blockchain as opposed to a custodial Lightning wallet.
That's excellent, Hermann. I'm just wondering, Hermann, with the price volatility in Bitcoin, how has that affected people's perceptions? Has it scared them off of investing or using it?
Yeah, that's a good question. The volatility is always something to think about. We've only been going for 4 months, so we haven't seen one of those really scary price drops just yet. We've had this recent one, which was started about a week and a half ago, where I think it dropped from about $54,000 to down to the low 40s. I think that's been the biggest one so far. But this is one of the things that we try to really hammer in when we first approached the vendors, is that from the very beginning we said, look, we have no idea what's going to happen to the price of this thing. So whatever you do, keep it small. We've only, all in all, our coaches, if you take all 4 coaches and you take all 3 shops where they've been spending their Bitcoin over the course of the last 3-4 months, in its entirety, they've only spent about $300 worth of Bitcoin. And that's spread over the course of 4 months, divided between 4 coaches and 3 different shops. So we're not talking about a massive amount of money. These shops have not moved over to a Bitcoin standard by a long shot. So I think the price volatility has not affected them to the extent that it's been catastrophic. And there's a good reason why we started small. If the effort grows, then we'd have to look at managing that by implementing a sort of a balancing act where you would move out of Bitcoin into South African rands at regular intervals to sort of counteract that, depending on what the shop owner wants to do. But we haven't lost any of them yet due to volatility.
That's fantastic. And all this adoption is really exciting, especially for us, over here sort of in the West. Could you run us through, say, an adoption? There's a new store in town that they're on board. What does that onboarding process looks like? Like, do you get them set up with BTC Pay Server and a wallet, whatnot? Are they running their own $3,000 full node with SSDs? What's happening there?
No, it's a simplified, very, very simplified setup so far. At the moment, what we would do is we would approach a new shop look, again, very early days. We've only got 3 shops that are on board so far. And to be perfectly honest with you, most of our work in the community has gone into keeping those 3 shops on board rather than to onboard more new shops for now. So we have onboarded some shops who have lost interest, but we have been able to keep these 3 shops on board. We've identified 13 shops in the township, and we only want to, that's 13, not 30. So we want to eventually onboard all 13 of them. But for now, we've approached 6 shops, and out of the 6, we've been able to onboard 3. We've got a map on Google Maps that kind of shows the layout of which shops we've identified, which ones we've spoken to. I post that every now and then. I post a little update when we've got a new shop on board. But basically, one of our coaches would go into the shop and he would install a wallet like Moon Wallet or Blue Wallet for the vendor, and he would just send them some sats and say, hey, look, this is how this thing works. This is what it is. And he would just start talking to the vendor about Bitcoin, trying to explain what it is, maybe try and connect them with one of the other shop owners, because they're all in a very, very close community. They all have agreements. All the shops are in the same township, so they all work sort of with each other, but they obviously competing, but they don't undercut each other by too much or whatever. So try and get them to chat to each other, and then slowly but surely try and make some purchases. The coach would go back a day later and try and buy a cool drink from this person in Bitcoin. And if they do come on board, what we do is we will set them up with a Bitcoin wallet that lets them print a Allen URL QR code, so that the coaches can walk in, scan the QR code, enter the amount, and send the payment. And they don't actually, the vendor doesn't actually have to do anything from their side in order to accept the payment. So there's no setting up of invoices or stuff like that. And that's also quite a nice setup for them, because it simplifies their life. They don't have to count out change. They don't have to break a 50 into 20s and 5 Rand coins and 2 Rand coins if they haven't got change. And then we would just, the coaches will just go back and try and keep on spending Bitcoin at that shop. We haven't got, I would like to eventually implement something along the lines of what they've got at Bitcoin Beach, which is a wallet that is tailor-made for the community itself. I have been talking to the guys at Galloy, which is the company that developed the Bitcoin Beach software. And if we can get something like that set up here, I think ultimately the ideal situation would be to do what Bitcoin Beach did, which is a community bank, where you don't have to worry about people living in shacks storing backups. I mean, we're talking about people who live in really desperate circumstances here. If the wind blows, they lose their roof, type of thing. So writing down a 12-word seed phrase in a situation like that is not ideal. So the way Bitcoin Beach solved that was to set up a multi-sig wallet, where the majority of the Bitcoin circulating in the community is held by a bank of community members. So I, as a community member, don't hold my private keys, but I know where the person lives who does hold the private keys. And that person alone can't do anything, because it's a multi-sig setup where he needs 9 or 10 other signatories to do anything with the Bitcoin. So it's sort of halfway in between the custodial and the non-custodial setup. So
it's like a 30 or 50 multi-sig.
I think Bitcoin Beach has a 9 of, I'm not sure, but it's quite a large multi-sig setup. Yeah.
Wow. Are you familiar with Mohammed Yunus and the Grameen Bank?
No.
This is exactly what he did back in the 80s. So he saw that this was in Indonesia or Pakistan. Sorry, I can't remember which one. But he basically saw that aid, trickle down aid, wasn't working. So he set up a system where he worked with the unbanked, people who could not get bank accounts. And the problem was they had no collateral, but the collateral was a group. So 5 people would form a business, and it was usually women. 5 women would form a business. If one of them fell ill or couldn't do something, the other 4 would make the repayments for them. So basically what you've done is exactly based on, he ended up winning the Nobel Prize for economics, whether or not that means something, but it was a birth of microfinancing, was Mohammed Yunus and Agribian Bank, and it's based on exactly what you just described. The proof of the pudding is in the group of people, each member holding the other member accountable. And it's what's proven to be the most effective means of getting people out of poverty, was allowing them access to capital. So yeah, I'm excited when you talk about that. So I think it's phenomenal. It's amazing that you guys are unfamiliar with that, because it just shows that we tend to have the same good ideas across the world.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it's there are no original ideas, and that's why I can't take any credit for anything that we are doing at the moment. I'm just trying to implement a version of what's already been done, and I don't think Bitcoin Beach, I don't think the idea they implemented is entirely original either. I'm pretty sure that the idea of community banks precedes what they did. But it is a fascinating idea to have a setup of trusted individuals in the community holding the funds for the community. And those people who are maybe not educated enough to hold their own private keys don't have to worry about that stuff. But they also don't have to trust a corporation that's headquartered somewhere in Singapore to hold their private keys for them. They know where the people holding their keys live, and those people are not going anywhere. They've been in the community for years. They are trusted and respected members of the community. And so I think it's a pretty ideal setup between, full self-custody, which is where ideologically, Bitcoiners would want everybody to move in the direction of full self-custody. And I encourage people to do that as far as possible. But, we got to be realistic at the same time. That's just not going to work for most people. And, the same thing could be said of running full nodes. As far as Bitcoin has done a fantastic job in trying to prioritize decentralization, you can't expect every single person to do that. As long as many people as possible do it. Decentralization is it's like the spectrum, and you want to push that as far towards the decentralized end of the spectrum as possible, because that's what provides you security against interference from state or corporate actors. And I think the same can be said for full self-custody. I think full self-custody is also a spectrum. There are people who go really, go all out, and you're talking about things like, 4 out of 5 multi-sig wallets made out of hardware wallets that are constructed in their own basement, never mind ordered from online, and then it's a spectrum, and so I think you've got to find that happy medium. And this idea of a community bank, I think Bitcoin Beach illustrated that it could work. And what you just said, Faris, that very much reminds me of that. I'm not familiar with that, so I'd like to look into that actually.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share so we can find others like yourself.
All of this is absolutely fascinating, Herman. And, sometimes as Bitcoiners, we get carried away. Bitcoin's going to cure cancer and save the world and all that kind of stuff. We have to be pragmatic. And I think you're taking the right approach. On one side, I can see a lot of people saying, oh, it's only 3 stores, a few kids, 3 stores, who cares, sort of thing. But you have to start somewhere. And what you're saying about decentralization, everyone can't run their full node. Everyone can't. I'm assuming a lot of your vendors are actually cashing out of Bitcoin or Lightning back into rent. That's fine. You have to start somewhere. We don't have to have everything perfect from day one. But what you're doing is exciting. And I hate to use this word because it gets overused a lot in charities, the word empowerment. But what you're really doing, you're really empowering people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of what it's about. I'm assuming, well, I shouldn't assume, the government's not maybe too happy. You're flying under the radar, but maybe the government's not too happy once you get a little bit more popular.
No, I think I look. I'm under no illusions. I don't think that what happened in El Salvador is going to happen in South Africa. I don't think South Africa is anywhere near. The South African government is not entirely hostile towards Bitcoin. It's not. I don't think South Africa is going to pull a move like what you saw happen in China or in other countries where there's been a really hard line taken against Bitcoin. I don't think that's going to happen here. But they're not going to go the El Salvador direction either. It's not going to become legal tender here anytime soon. I'm pretty sure about that. For the time being, we are flying under the radar in terms of Bitcoin adoption. It's like you said, it's only 3 stores and 4 coaches. So our entire effort so far is basically that. But you have to start somewhere. I don't know what the response is going to be from the authorities if this grows. I don't know if it is going to grow. We'll have to wait and see. If it does grow, it's going to have to happen organically. It's not the kind of thing that's going to be. We're not going to be able to bootstrap this thing forever. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. So we'll see. And in terms of what the response is, I guess we'll have to wait and see what the response is. The response from the community so far has been quite positive. And I think that comes back to what you mentioned about empowerment. My personal belief is that empowerment comes from within. So a person has to have a adjustment in their state of mind in order to create empowerment for themselves. You can help a person along the way. And the best help that you can create is to help them adjust their perspective. But ultimately, nobody else is going to lift you up and create personal empowerment. That's going to have to come from the individual themselves. And that's been the underlying philosophy for the NPO that we started years ago. And it's also the philosophy that I think it ties back into the Bitcoin philosophy. You've got to take responsibility for yourself as far as possible. And I think Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin is going to cure cancer. I don't think Bitcoin solves everything, but it can solve some of the very, very core problems that has been the cause for many other issues. I think we look at a lot of other issues and we don't always realize that there's something. It brings me back to this idea that money is so fundamental to our existence. It really is, one of those very, very basic things that we need for survival. No matter where you are on the planet, if you haven't got money, you just don't survive, or barely in most cases. And if that basic element of survival is corrupted, then one can expect a lot of other problems to sort of come out of that. It kind of makes me think about if there's some strange volcanic eruption tomorrow and the air that we all breathe on this planet becomes intoxicated overnight, it's going to have a lot of knock-on effects. And we might see negative side effects in areas which we never expected. And that's kind of what our broken system of money reminds me of. And there's no doubt that the monetary system is broken. We've seen it over the past 2 years, really, where good intentions, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think, if you've seen central banks, not only in the US, but all over Europe and even here in South Africa, the amount of debt that's been loaded onto future generations it's just not sustainable, and it's one way or another, something's got to give, and you've got to have a system of money that is sound at its core, that is fair, and I think that's also been something that's really, once we've explained that, and I saw this happening in our coaches as well, because I mean, our coaches come from the same community where the kids come from. It's the same community where the vendors come from. And, they've been pulling the short end of the stick for generations. And once they've gotten their head around this idea of what Bitcoin is, the one thing that really, created a spark, and I can see that spark in them, is when they understand that this is a fair system. It doesn't matter who you are, it treats you the same way, whether you're a billionaire sitting somewhere, in a luxury yacht, without a worry in the world, or whether you're a little kid who can only afford to save $50 a week or a month, the rules are the same. Everybody gets treated the same way. And I think if you build a society around that principle, a lot of problems that we're trying to solve through other means will almost take care of themselves.
So what are some of your pain points at the moment? Like, what maybe, again, we like to have our rose-colored glasses on with Bitcoin. What are some of the things that are kind of, not really working or need to improve?
Specifically with regard to our effort, I think if it was easier to convert in and out of the local currency, that would help a lot. Another pain point is education. There's a lot of good efforts ongoing to translate Bitcoin material into local languages. But then again, even if it is translated into a local language, we work with people who, unfortunately, as a result of a failed state education system, the level of education is quite shocking sometimes. So that's quite difficult. That's a big challenge. Bitcoin also relies on technology and technological devices like smartphones. Access to that sort of technology is a bit of a pain point. The coaches who we employ and the vendors who we are spending Bitcoin with often use very, very old phones with little memory and not enough space for more than one or two apps running at the same time. That makes it tricky. A cash payment is not going to fail if both people can pass it between one another. But with Bitcoin being a technology, if your phone crashes in the middle of trying to make a payment, then that's obviously not ideal. So, and those devices, I mean, look, again, Bitcoin has done quite well in trying to be as low tech as possible, but it still relies on technology at the end of the day. And so access to smartphones is quite tricky. And it's not just a matter of, we're not necessarily going to solve that problem. If somebody came out of the woodwork tomorrow and said, here's 100 new smartphones for you, that won't necessarily solve the problem, because it's, again, back to education. Like, you gotta then educate people to look after this thing. There's no point in cracking the screen, my man, because if you crack the screen, you're not going to see whether your payment's confirmed or not. Education, access to basic technology, conversion in and out of local currency. That's probably the main sticking points. And then obviously funding. Sorry?
Just that? Only that?
Only that? No. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes back to funding always, because we have to keep the underlying NPO running. If we want to, if we lost we came pretty close to losing this NPO with COVID. A lot of our donations came from the tourism industry. South Africa had a very, very healthy tourism industry prior to COVID. It was one of the few economic sectors that was showing a healthy growth. Agriculture is another big one, but that was in decline. Mining has never been doing that well over the last couple of years, but tourism was doing really well in South Africa, and a lot of our donations came through tourism. So with COVID doing what it did, we almost lost the NPO because we had to suddenly try and generate donations in a very different way. So keeping the NPO running is a massive challenge, because if we lose the NPO, we lose the platform in the community. And this is, again, going back to Bitcoin Beach, and what they illustrated is that if you're going to try and do this kind of thing with getting a Bitcoin economy going in a sort of a relatively poor community, you have to have a platform in the community. You can't just go in there and start throwing around sats. You need people who have been working in the community for years. You need people who have earned the trust of people in the community, which is, again, why I try and work behind the scenes, and I let the coaches be the face of the organization in the community, because they're the ones who've earned the community's trust. So I think probably the single biggest challenge is to keep the NPO going, because that's our platform at the end of the day.
I mean, you're trying to achieve something incredibly difficult. You're going against sort of, hundreds of years of fiat currency, and not to mention the technology, the community, society. And I think it's incredible what you're doing. I could go on forever and ask you questions about Lightning, but we've been over an hour and Faris is about to fall asleep. So us as a podcast, Bitcoin Basics, Faris and myself, but also someone listening to this, how can they help you?
I think awareness is probably if people know about what we are trying to do, then that's the most important thing. Donating will help the effort, obviously, but I think the donations will come. Again, this has to happen organically. If it is going to work, then it has to happen organically. If the community doesn't want it or they don't need it, then it shouldn't work. And if the Bitcoin community is not willing to support it, then maybe it shouldn't work either. But if we can spread awareness of what we're trying to do, and enough people find out, then I think it will grow organically if it's something that needs to happen. So I think the first and the most important thing is awareness. And I mean, that's basically what we're doing at the moment. I'm talking about it, and you guys have given me this platform to talk about it, and that's helping to spread awareness. So I think that's probably the most important thing.
So would donations from our listeners be of any help to you, Herman? Because we don't want to see you guys lose the NPO.
Absolutely, it would. I mean, of course, donations, is what keeps the NPO going. But a donation has to be something that sort of a person has to feel good about donating to a cause. And so I don't want to stress that too much. It's kind of something that if it happens, it's good and it should happen. But if it doesn't happen, then maybe we should look at what we're doing and trying to do it in a different way. Donations
Bitcoiners never feel good. Bitcoiners, it's always the end of the world.
I mean, look, if we can find one OG Bitcoiner who's willing to go, here's a Bitcoin for you, that would be fantastic. I think that's what happened with. I think that's what got Bitcoin Beach off the ground. Bitcoin Beach actually was not the first NPO that this donor approached. He approached many NPOs before he got to Bitcoin Beach, and he had a condition attached to his donation, which is that you guys have to use this donation in Bitcoin. And so it was Michael Peterson who eventually showed him a plan of action that looked like it could work. And if we could find someone like that, that'd be fantastic, obviously. But I think awareness is more important.
We'll put a link up there, and we'll get our viewers to send you guys some stats, because this is real world, life-changing difference that you guys are doing. And just to defend myself, when Gordon says I'm falling asleep, don't take it personally, Herman. I've been battling a flu for over a week, and in my part of the world, it's past my bedtime.
No, I understand. No stress. It's all good.
So in all seriousness, Herman, and I'll put everything in the description of the show notes, but if someone does want to donate, and we have a lot of audio listeners, give us a link or somewhere they can go.
Well, we've got a Lightning Network donation address on our Twitter profile. There's a little QR code on our header image. That's a LNURL QR code. So any sats that are donated to that address comes straight to us. And that will be used to cover the coaches' salaries, really. We've also got a Bitcoin address, which is not Lightning Network, that you can donate to. Again, also on our Twitter profile, which is @Bitcoin Ekasi. Otherwise, we also take Bitcoin donations on the website to the Certificates, which is thecertificates.com. Any donations that we receive in Bitcoin will not be converted back to fiat. We will use those donations to pay salaries to the coaches. And the more donations we receive in Bitcoin, the more we'll move the coaches' salaries away from fiat currency and onto Bitcoin, and slowly but surely push more satoshis into the community that way.
Cool. And when is your NFT coming out?
No, I think for the time being, we focused on Bitcoin only. It's just it just makes things easier, I've got nothing personally. I've got nothing against interesting developments in the wider cryptocurrency space, but there's so much happening in Bitcoin already that it just feels like, if I'm going to overwhelm the coaches with that stuff, we're not going to make much progress. So we focused on Bitcoin only for now. And probably will be.
Oh, that's exactly where we are on this show. Herman, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if it's okay with you, we'd love to catch up with you again next year.
Absolutely.
If I'm ever allowed to leave Fortress New Zealand, I'll definitely have to come and visit you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would really enjoy that. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Herman.
really appreciate it, Herman. And to get a boots on the ground or surfboards in the water report from someone who's actually doing, this work, and it is uphill. What you've discussed is incredibly difficult. So hats off to you, your team, the coaches, and we will definitely be following you with interest as well. So again, people, all links in the show notes in the description. Please check that out and help Herman.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Herman.
Thanks, Herman.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share so we can spread this educational content to others like yourself. Visit bitcoinbasics.help.
Disclaimer. Any content provided by Coin Compass is for educational and informational purposes only and is not investment, legal, tax, or any other professional advice. A qualified professional should be consulted before making any financial decisions. Coin Compass will at times recommend certain products, services, and technologies, but these are opinions based upon our own or podcast guests' experience and not endorsements. We take no liability for out-of-date or inaccurate information, software bugs, manufacturing errors, technology misuse, or issues involving third parties. Visit coincompass.com for more information and please contact us.